Hello everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar session on GA4 reporting and some of the discrepancies that we're seeing a year in. Before I hand over to our speaker today, I'd like to introduce Oban International. We're founded in 2002, and we're a leading award-winning digital marketing agency specializing in international growth. Our core services include paid media, SEO, content marketing, social media, CRO, and also UX, which we actually view through an international lens. And what makes us really unique is our LIME network, which stands for Local In-Market Expert. And with over 450 LIMEs in over 80 markets worldwide, we're able to offer our clients up-to-date cultural insights that allow them to seize the best marketing opportunities, avoid costly mistakes, and ultimately lead to campaign success. We're also really proud to win numerous awards for our international growth partnership strategies and campaigns that we've worked with big bus tours on. So without further ado, I'm really pleased to hand over to Mike, who will be taking you through today's session. Welcome, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Turnham. I'm the technology and data head at Oban International. I'm going to talk to you today about GA4 and some data discrepancies that we're seeing. And we really think it's a good time for us to look back on the last 12 months, especially as universal analytics has finally been sunset. And just to give you a bit of context about this, we're going to be showing you some challenges and solutions that we've looked into with our experience of not only using GA4 directly, but also using the API and building BI reports and dashboards for our clients. We use Power BI, but the insights that we'll cover off today could be relevant to you if you're using Tableau or Looker Studio or any other BI platform really where you're visualizing your data. So just to jump into the agenda for today, so we thought it'd be a good idea to cover off the key differences between Universal Analytics and GA4, just as a bit of a reminder and to add some context. We're going to go into the data discrepancies in a lot more detail within GA4 and show you how to mitigate them too. And then we'll leave you with some key takeaways and recommendations. So firstly, just jumping into what are those key differences between Universal Analytics and GA4. Well, there's quite a few. I'm going to cover off a few here quickly, and I'm going to go into the big three in a bit more detail. So firstly, GA4 collects both website and app data. So this is a change from UA, which is more website based, and this gives you a better understanding of your customer journey. Sessions are also handled quite differently within GA4, and they've also added a new engaged session metric. The user interface is also considerably different. It's a new platform. It's not just an iteration on Universal Analytics. It's a whole new platform that's been built from the ground up. So the look and feel is very different. And there are new reports and features and a new UI to work your way around. Device tracking, cross-device tracking is also improved and has more advanced capabilities within GA4. Now onto the big three changes that I'm going to go into a bit more detail on. So the first of these is the data collection method within GA4. So in Universal Analytics in UA, this was based on a hit-based method, and hits were interactions on your website, and they might be things like page views, whereas Google Analytics 4 is an event-based model. On face value, that might sound kind of similar. It might be like slightly naming convention differences, but GA4 is much more user-centric, and events are much more customizable and can contain much more detailed parameters within those. An analogy for this really is if you kind of looked at these as rather than analytics platforms, it was a library, and you've kind of got a model where your librarian is capturing data on customers that come into the library. Under the old hit-based model, the librarian would just be recording data events next to customers as they come in, and that could be like customer A has visited, customer B has taken a book out, customer C is using the computer, whereas GA4, the model would be much more user-centric, and the librarian in that case would be capturing a more holistic view of each user as they navigate around the library. So an example would be, customer A has visited the library, they've taken a book out, they've returned some books, and they've used the computer for 10 minutes. So that's just a more holistic approach, and those are kind of the differences that we'll see between those two models. The next big one, and this really is a big one, is the attribution model. In universal analytics, the attribution model was defaulted to a last click model, which gives all of the credit to the last piece of activity that had a touch point before a conversion occurs on the website. Now, this tended to favor bottom of the funnel activity, such as organic search or paid search. Whereas the Google Analytics 4 model is data-driven. So in theory, this should give you a better spread of credit across different touch points and more fairly attribute marketing activity. The reality of this is that it's based on historical activity. So it is unique to each property. So it's not a black box model that's applied across every website. But it is unique, and it analyzes the data that you have to your particular property and your accounts, and that's updated very regularly. It's updated weekly as well. So it will differ quite differently from that last click model when you're comparing between the two platforms, and you should expect that to be, the results to not be very similar at all. The data-driven model, though, it can be a bit of a black box, and we are relying on Google really to determine whether or not they are crediting things fairly. So it's one to bear in mind. The third topic I wanted to touch on was data handling methods. And we'll go into some of these in a bit more detail in a moment. But there's a couple of topics a few topics to touch on here. The first one is privacy. So cookie and privacy law really has forced Google into taking some new approaches, and one of those is called data thresholding, which we'll touch on in a moment. And this actually includes withholding data from you. Another one is around efficiency. So Google has deployed techniques to make the platform more efficient to run. Obviously, it's a free platform for most users, although there is a paid tier, but most businesses do use the free version, and Google are trying to make efforts here to make it more manageable to run. And the techniques that they deploy, again, we're going to touch on one of these in a bit more detail. It does trade off a bit of accuracy, which is really good to know and is worth bearing in mind. And another key one is about data retention too. So data is now limited to a maximum of 14 months. It defaults to 2 months when you set a new account up, so you do need to make sure you change that to 14 months. And this is on the free version. If you have the paid for version, you can extend that further. But again, this is quite a change from universal analytics. So what does this all mean? So generally, you can't compare universal analytics and GA4 apples to apples. Now, we have found in our experience some clients have relatively close results, but a lot of them don't, and that does come down to the way that data is handled and how it's collected, and also that attribution model. We have found that data accuracy is less reliable in GA4, and really we're sort of seeing GA4 as a platform that's better used for measuring performance trends over time rather than sort of exact performance, exact marketing performance data. It's also really important that you collect that historical GA4 data into a database so that you don't lose it. And we'll touch on this in more detail too, but there really is a need to kind of consider a larger margin of error when you're QAing your data because of those data accuracy issues. Now let's jump into these data discrepancies and accuracy issues into a bit more detail and show you how to mitigate against them too. The first one I wanted to touch on, which we referenced earlier, is data thresholding. So data thresholds is a new concept in GA4, and so this pertains to cookie policy and privacy legislation that's being put into place. And it is a good thing for users, it's a good thing for us, but it does offer some complexity when you're viewing your data. Effectively, what's happening here is Google can withhold data from your reports, and this is when data sets have the potential to identify an individual or expose sensitive information. This could be if you combine other data sets elsewhere as well, and that you may be able to then expose or identify an individual. It might not necessarily be that the data set itself within Google 100% identifies a person, but it could be used in conjunction with other data sets and help you build a picture. So obviously, from a privacy point of view, it's good that we're not exposing people in sensitive information. But as I said, it can lead to issues with QA and data discrepancies. Typically, this happens when demographic data is present, so like location data or interest data is present in the data. And also, this is present when we're viewing directly in the UI, but also through the API too. Now, there's ways to mitigate this. Obviously, if you take the demographic data out, that may stop thresholding from occurring. But also, it tends to happen on smaller data sets. So if you extend the date range and make it a larger data set, it is less prone to happen. Otherwise, really, there's no control over this. It's at the whim of Google to deploy this, and we don't really know what data has been removed for obvious reasons and when and why it's going to be applied. So what are the lessons that we've learned from this? So if data thresholding has been put in place, it can make totals in the UI and the API mismatch. So an example of this would be, say you're observing total organic sessions within the UI, and then trying to compare that with a report with the same data of organic sessions, but then it's segmented by location and interest. If thresholding has been applied, then those totals aren't going to match up. So this is important to consider, not only when you're just looking around browsing through the UI itself, but if you've built your reports off of quite granular data sets where thresholding might have been applied, then you may find this mismatch when you come to QA out directly within the platform. So how do you spot this? So there's a couple of ways to spot this. In the UI itself, you will see a little warning icon. There's a little drop down next to the report title. And if thresholding's been applied, a little warning icon will appear there. If everything is okay, then it will be a little tick, and you can click on that drop down and it will tell you the nature of the issue that is present. In this case, on this screenshot, you can see that thresholding has been applied. If you're pulling data through the API, there's also a little flag in there within the metadata, which will give you a true or false entry as to whether that data has been subject to thresholding. So that can help you programmatically identify whether threshold is in place and make sure that you consider that for when you come to your QA. Now I'm going to show you this in practice as well. I'm just going to open up GA4 and I'm going to show you, this is a user acquisition report directly in UI, and it's segmented by organic, searched by default channel group, and also by age. And you can see up here next to the report title, the little drop down with the warning icon. And if we click on it, we can see that thresholding has been applied. And I just wanted to draw your attention to the total we're seeing here for new users. We're seeing a total of 242 new users. Now, if I remove this segment, this age segment, I'm just going to remove it here, and the data will refresh. Now you'll see that that total's jumped up to 287. Now, that's because the threshold had been applied and it obscured that data, but now the threshold has been removed, and you're actually seeing the true total that's being represented in the UI. Now, if we go back, this is that report previously. Obviously, if you built your dashboards off of this more granular data set, and then you go to do a QA between these two figures, you're going to see a mismatch. And it's something that you just need to bear in mind when you are building your reports and when you are QAing them too. Just going to jump back. So the next topic I wanted to touch on was just a note on the GA4 API, whilst we're kind of talking about APIs. So it's a word of caution, really. Currently, the API for GA4 is only available as an alpha or beta version. The alpha version is used for kind of extensive testing. It's not one that we would recommend building your reports on. The beta version, as Google states, should be relatively stable, although there are potential for breakages to occur. But it should be the one that you use to build your reports on. However, we encountered data accuracy issues when we used the API, and this was quite prevalent when we were first using GA4, when we were migrating a lot of our clients over. And at the time, we did speak to a Google rep as well, who went on the record with us to say that it is a beta product. and there were actually known issues with accuracy through the API. It's not widely publicized, but they said there wasn't a known fix date on that. We've done some more recent testing on that, and it doesn't seem to be an issue right now, but it is a product that's still in beta, so it is worth just bearing in mind that if you hit a bit of a roadblock and you're trying to QA your data sets and you have a discrepancy and you're not sure why, it could be that there is an underlying issue with the API, and you might want to investigate that in a little bit more detail if you've ruled out everything else. The next topic I wanted to talk to you about is, it's a bit of a mouthful, Hyperlog plus. This relates back to Google's attempts to make the platform more efficient, and this is actually an algorithm that they deploy, which I will explain to you now. So Hyperlog++, it's an algorithm that Google used to efficiently estimate unique elements or the cardinality of a data set. And cardinality in this context really is the count of unique items in a data set. So the example would be unique sessions by landing page. In practice, what they're attempting to do is, rather than count all of those individually, is estimate it with the algorithm instead. Google states that it should be very accurate when they do this, but in practice and our experience has shown it actually can be quite inaccurate, and it can lead to discrepancies between your BI reports and your dashboards and what you're seeing in GA4. Just to kind of explain that into an analogy, this could be counting jelly beans in a jar. You can tip them out, you can count them one by one. It's going to take a while to do that, but you're going to get an accurate result. Or you can look at the jar and you can make an educated guess. Now, it's going to be quick to do that, but obviously it's going to be riddled with inaccuracies. The lessons that we've learned from this really is it does go back to that issue of, if you are taking a more granular data set and using that to form the basis of your BI reports, and then you derive your totals from that, then it's going to potentially lead to inaccuracies when you do your QA, if that algorithm has been deployed. So it can lead to discrepancies when you're QAing your data between data sets in your reports, your own models, and when you're looking at the GA4 UI. Counterintuitively, though, the totals in your own models might actually be more accurate than those in GA4. Now, I'm going to show you another example. I'm going to jump into GA again and just show you what I mean. So this is another report. This is an exploration this time. It's a landing page report with sessions in it. And up here, you can see a total, and then you can see all of the different segments down here of the session totals next to it. Now, this total up here has been estimated using Hyperlog++. It's not a sum of all of these individual segments totals. Now, if you download this report, which I did earlier, you will see something like this. I've tidied it up a little bit so that it's a little bit easier for us to view today. But you can see here, this is that estimated total, and it is not derived from adding these up. If I sum these up together myself, so I've selected this, you can see down here the sum 11,916, whereas the estimated is 11,278. Now I've put a little table in here so I can show you this to you a bit more clearly. Here is the Hyperlog total, and here is the actual sum total, and this is the difference, 6%, which is actually quite significant, and we've seen that go a lot higher. This is just a more recent one I actually just found today, but we have seen that go into the double digits. It's definitely worth bearing this in mind. It's one that if you can spot quite easily, and just download the data and sum it up yourself and see if that's been put in place. Right. So what do these mean? So data QA between GA4 and your own business insights reports can be quite problematic. We tended to use a margin of error of about 3% or up to 3% before we would start really doing a deep dive investigation. Conventionally across the industry, that might go up to 5%, but we're actually having to tolerate a much higher margin of error now. So up to 20% before we would investigate and do a deep dive to see what the issue is. Most of our our discrepancies that we're seeing in our experience that are below 20% can be explained by one of those scenarios that we've detailed here. So what are those key takeaways? So just to recap on these then, the key takeaways are, because of that 14-month retention policy, it's really important that you're storing your historical data from GA4 or you're going to lose it. Data accuracy is less reliable than it was in UA, and especially when you're comparing to your own business insight reports, your own dashboards. And QA really does need to factor in, you need to factor in a greater variance and a greater margin of error so that you're not wasting time investigating some of these known issues. And really, those form our opinion that GA4 is best used as a tool for reviewing performance trends over time, rather than taken as a record of the absolute performance that you would have done with UA. And that's it from us today. So thank you for watching. Please reach out on email or on LinkedIn with any questions. I hope that was useful for you, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.